It is Ian Ryan with your pre-match warm-up as we start to look ahead to Aston Villa on Friday night. I've got Sean, Josh and Greg with me for this one. It is action-packed. We will have a caller a little bit later on to give us the Aston Villa perspective. It will be Tom Fahy. And we will have an insert from Neil on a six-a-side fundraiser as well. But this one is going out for free. It is with our partners, NordVPN. Josh, I'm going to come to you because you are a NordVPN fan. You have joined the club. Why do you use NordVPN? Talk us through it.
Mainly to sort of give myself internet security like the whole time. So it's just like constantly on my phone, like active connection all the time. But it's also good for like accessing like geolock content and stuff like that as well. So that would genuinely be the couple of things I use it for. I've heard there's a way you can get around watching some of those Saturday 3 p.m. kickoffs, but don't say you heard that from me.
Well, I'll tell no one, lad, honestly. But yeah, if you want to get extra internet security and peace of mind when logging into public Wi-Fi's, then NordVPN could be the sketch for you. So if you want to find out more, go to nordvpn.com/tour. There is also a 30-day money-back guarantee, and I do believe they are offering a 4 months extra free on a 2-year deal as well, so well worth checking out. But Josh, the manager, has done his press conference this morning. The first thing he was asked was about a number of players who have been on the sick list for the last couple of weeks. In Alisson's case, a lot longer. He said with the keeper, there's a chance, but I got the impression that he probably wouldn't feature at Villa Park. Salah, a little bit more positive. Maybe we get to see him for a few minutes. Canate should be fine. Florian Wirtz has been on antibiotics. He may well train this week, but he wasn't too sure, so it feels touch and go. I think ultimately here, Liverpool are going to be taken to the pitch on Friday with a number of big hitters missing. But listen, the challenge is to get results, even if you are missing some of these big players.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that we thought Liverpool had, what was a pretty deep squad, at least on paper, coming into this season. Listen, it's been decimated throughout the course of the season. It's been clear as well in the manager's use of it. And it's sort of in the same way it was last season, really, where I think the squad was probably actually, I don't know if it was a little bit thinner or a little bit stronger. It's almost a toss of a coin, but your perception of it becomes that it is thinner over the course of the season because the manager just doesn't fancy certain players. So even going into this one, and listen, I don't think he's been in any way, the opposite of vindicated with Federico Chiesa. I don't want to see more of Federico Chiesa, but coming into the season, the manager thought like he was a genuine option. I thought he was a genuine option. Maybe it's become the case that someone like Rio Wengamoa is instead. Rio was probably one of the bright sparks from Chelsea at the weekend of basically not very many bright sparks really. Maybe throw Gravenberch into that as well because he gets his goal and both them to a positive first half, but nobody's good enough second half, and that's, a lot of those players out there cost an awful lot of money, and we've seen be really good, technical footballers for Liverpool as recently as last season, if not a couple more seasons for a couple of them. So yeah, no excuses really. The injury update is not necessarily positive. I'm not certain that we'll see Alisson Becker again this season. Even what Slot said about Alisson Becker's future didn't really reassure me that we'll see Alisson Becker again, which would be, a huge shame really. I'm not confident we'll see Florian Wirtz again, given what he's said there about him being on antibiotics. And then Salah is probably the one positive one where, at least you feel like you'll get to give him the send-off he deserves in that last game against Brentford at Anfield.
How did you think the manager's mood was, Greg? 'Cause he seemed pretty upbeat. He was asked about, the mood, not only of himself, but the camp as well, the players, how they're feeling and stuff. It was another disappointing result against Chelsea that you've got to say that. I think what got me, not necessarily the most, but it's the fact that they've had a week between games recently, and the manager was at pains to say at different parts of the season really that it was difficult because you're playing every 2 or 3 days, maybe you're playing twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever it's been. But if you give me more time on the training pitch, then invariably you see results maybe improve. And that quite hasn't been the case, has it really?
Nah, it's not. And there's been a few times this season in which, whether it is coming from Slot himself or even just the journalists have said that Slot said behind the scenes that things will improve. And then, we've had catastrophe results, to put it, politely, like against City in the FA Cup and then against PSG over 2 legs. And you hear these things and you see Slot in these press conferences and he's quite, he's not mellow. He's not like looking downbeat, because you saw it in some of the press conferences with Jürgen after a few bad results. Like you could feel it, like, he was there, he was feeling down, and you felt it watching it. But with Slot, it's almost as if like maybe it's a front that he's putting on, or maybe it is just the case that he's just trying to look at it positively, just for the sake of his own peace of mind, or whether it's because he genuinely does believe in what he says. As a Liverpool fan, and as I've watched the season progress, it almost kind of feels like, to me, it's like he doesn't truly grasp the situation in which Liverpool have kind of seen themselves in throughout the season. And, you know, when you see him going into press conferences and he's, you know, saying stuff like, oh, you know, give me more time on the training pitch and, you know, results would improve. And then we've got a week in between games and you're not really seeing any improvements, and not just the results, but the actual performances in games. And you kind of think to yourself, like, what are they actually doing in training? What are they actually doing in the extra time now, which they have got on the training pitch? Like, what is the process around, you know, when they get in, what they do on the pitch, what they do in the gym, and then what they do on, you know, when they get to Anfield or when they play elsewhere and on the weekend. And to be honest, it doesn't really fill me with hope, especially going into the next season. And obviously when you hear about the doubts for some of the players, you know, for tomorrow, you're looking at it a bit more like, well, we've had times this season where we have had a fuller squad, and it's been the exact same as now when we've got, I guess you could say, maybe a depleted squad. So you're going into that game against Villa and you kind of think to yourself, like, well, like, where do we go from here, type thing. And that's the kind of like vibe that I get when I watch the Slot press conferences, when I see the quotes online, and you know, it doesn't really fill you with too much kind of positive feeling or just hope in general.
Sure, and I was quite pleased with Mo's question at the end. So we're back and forth this a little bit in terms of the order of the press conference, but he pushed the manager a little bit on the story around maybe Liverpool falling in on themselves against Chelsea, which the manager wanted to bat away post-game. He was really kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say aggressive with his response, but he was pretty keen to put that one to bed. But Mo pushed him again, just in terms of building on momentum when you get a goal ahead. I think that's where a lot of the frustration lies, when you are finding yourself a goal up, regardless of what options you've got within the team. We can all say, yeah, you'd rather have this player available or that player, etc. I get all that. And it's not easy without forwards. No one's denying it for 1 second. But if you find yourself a goal up, that puts you in a really, really good position to then put your foot down a little bit and find ways of at the very least, keeping the opposition at bay and making it difficult for them. So I like the way Mo pushed them on that. But again, the manager talked about, you know, listen, styles make fights, all that, you know, the other team can have the ball, and when they do, it makes it really, really difficult. What did you make of his response to that question? Because again, it felt like he maybe wasn't quite getting the point.
Yeah, possibly. I think he, in a press conference environment, was probably as honest as he sort of could be, because you never know if that's what he really thinks, obviously behind closed doors. Fair. I said on review, I have major concerns on Chelsea in the first half, because he even said in his pre-match press conference to Chelsea quite accurately that they will build out when they've got the ball, they use three at the back. So when the team sheet drops and people are like, could Chelsea be playing a back five? Could this be a back three? Now that might be a bit different to what they do out of possession. It ended up not being too different. But in possession, there's no surprises there. So what, they build out on a back three? You knew they were going to do that. You even said in your pre-match press conference they were going to do that. So Chelsea didn't do anything particularly exciting down our right, their left. Cucurella stood on Jones. They tried to move Enzo over into that area. João Pedro was flicking between Konate and Van Dijk, so they're not sure quite who's on him, and trying to make sure he takes Konate's attention, so there's no cover for Jones in that area. But letting the opposition centre-backs have the ball when you're 1-0 up might be one thing. But when they start putting stuff into Caicedo, that's when you're on them. That's where the intensity is on there. You can't have any footballer getting their chin up and having a look around, because they're going to look a lot better than they are. And if you've got Caicedo and Enzo getting the chin up, having a look around Anfield, maybe seeing if the mates are in the crowd, they've got that long on the ball, you are going to have problems. And when you actually look at parts of Szoboszlai and McAllister and Gravenberch in the game, I don't think they weren't grafting. When I watched it back, I don't think they could inject the intensity from that shape, because I think that shape is too complicated, in that there are some sides that would go man-to-man, and Sunday League, you know your jobs. And then there are other sides, let's say like Arrigo Sacchi's Milan, which would be much more zonal shape. And then when it comes into those zones, you want to make sure you're 3v3 and 4v4 in them little pockets of the pitch. And too many times, that Liverpool side, when you watch it back, you could draw a square and go, Chelsea are 3v2, Chelsea are 4v3. How do you go and inject that intensity? If Szoboszlai goes and presses, it's just Piggy in the middle. He looks like the idiot. And if you all try and go, you're just leaving the free man, and they're good enough to find them. And my biggest thing that's been there all season is the shape of the back four, the distances between them, and what they do moving up and down has been a mess. You go to Ellen Road, it was really bad that day. You go to Chelsea and look at some of the clips of Cucurella getting in the back. You got Van Dijk on one line, Konate on another, the fullback's doing something else. And I understand there's been a lot of change at right back and there's been a lot of change in goal, and there's so much mitigation for him. But I think, like, how far does that mitigation go? And each person can have their own view on that. Because if we were getting relegated right now, I think everyone would be unanimous that mitigation doesn't go that far. But I think everyone's got to make their own decision with how far do you think that mitigation goes. And for me, if you've got a week on the training pitch with the problems Liverpool have, if Liverpool looked good out of possession, that there was intensity in the right areas, and that when we counter-attacked and when we got the ball in the final third, it was breaking down because of a lack of quality, I think you'd then go, yeah, well, Isak's not starting, we've got no Ekitike, no Wirtz, they've let him down with the wingers, I get that. But when you've had a week on the training pitch and your back four looks a mess, and players don't know whether they're going zonal in this moment or they're locking on man-to-man, I felt really sorry for Cody Gakpo. I don't think he knew what his job was in there between the double pivots for Chelsea and the back three. And they didn't do anything different in that regard to what they do. And I think that, now at half-time he corrects it. He makes Curtis Jones man mark Enzo, and he makes Frimpong man mark Cucurella. I think that's just too late. I don't know why you can't make some of them tweaks 25 minutes into the game and help your team out. So I do think the Chelsea performance, Mo was right to push forward on that. I think the manager probably can't tell the truth in the answers to that question because it wouldn't be good for him or the squad. But yeah, my main concerns is all season, the out of possession stuff isn't getting any better.
Yeah, that's definitely a worry, Josh. I think where it's also difficult is, even when we're doing shows like this, a lot of it's dominated by the manager. Understandably so, because you've got to call it as you see it, and we're seeing lots and lots of performances where it's just nowhere near the level you expect. That said, at some point we will have to kind of draw a line under it one way or another. He was pushed on his future, and it was pretty clear from his response that he absolutely expects to be Liverpool manager next season.
Yeah, and everything we've sort of heard from, I don't know if you want to call them briefings. Beth Lindop gave a really good answer on a gutter the other day about this. Like, it's not all briefings, some of it is just conversations that journalists are having with people at the club and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if everything that's coming out of the club is pretty unanimous that either it gets revisited in the summer or Arne Slot is still going to be here next season. I would imagine that at some point there'll be a review in the summer and that there'll be some really honest and frank conversations that happen within that, and everyone accepts responsibility for the parts of it that they've sort of let each other down in. Sean's right to mention there that the recruitment team definitely let the manager down. I think the manager is letting the players down, possibly the fans even to some extent, in that, again, like Gregg mentioned before, every time he speaks you don't feel particularly inspired by anything he's saying, and Sean made a couple of interesting points there about the manager's level of honesty. Like, I think too often we sort of fall back on that, and it is almost a trope of he's Dutch, so he's just going to be bluntly honest all the time. I don't think he is, and there's a degree to which he can't be honest all the time, but I think there's some things he's saying where he's sort of just papering over cracks really, and maybe it's because he's trying to protect some of the players a bit. I think loads of the players look really low on confidence. There's so many of them that are out of form, and when you're at that point where you've got footballers that you've previously trusted or rated really highly, and there's so many of them that are out of confidence and out of form, that's where it kind of does fall to the manager for me to either inspire that confidence or to make changes that bring the best out of them. And yet that's not really the case, and even ones who we've seen be so good this season, like Shaw mentioned Szoboszlai there in terms of his press, and the thing that was sort of frustrating me against Chelsea was Szoboszlai so good at the running up to the tackle bit of the pressing, and every time he goes to make a tackle he's I'm going to do something cute here where I move out the way so that they hoof it away and it goes to one of our players, but most of the time it doesn't work, or he pulls out the tackle. There's one he pulled out of on Caicedo which I was it's unforgivable, and Chelsea came away with the ball and were able to build from that. Then it's moments like that where you do start to get frustrated with the players, but unfortunately, the sort of nature of modern football is we could be frustrated with all of them, but they're not going to be sat in a performance review in the summer with the threat of their contract being terminated. That's going to fall down to Arne Slot. And yeah, I imagine and I hope really that's going to be a really honest and frank conversation, and there's going to be a real sort of, you know, genuine scope of like what can this manager actually achieve with this squad next season, because even if he brings in 2 or 3 in the summer, it's still going to be most of these lads that he's not inspired confidence from this season, that he's not got more than the sum of their parts from. And listen, if he goes, then the onus is completely on the players, where it's like he's took the bullet for yous now. Like whoever the new fella is who comes in, we all kind of imagine it's going to be Xabi Alonso. He can't take the same bullet for yous again. Like this is on yous now to go and do your jobs better than you've been doing them this season.
Here is the manager talking about his future.
I don't think I'm deciding that alone on myself, but I have every reason to believe I'm the Liverpool manager next season. Because first of all, I'm contracted to this club, and second of all, from all the talks we are having, so yeah, that is my take on it. But as you said, if you don't have the best season, especially if you compare it with last season, if you compare it with other season, maybe you have a different debate. But if you compare it with last season, this has definitely not been a great season. Then it's also normal that criticism comes. And I think we've all had our share. And with all, I mean, the players have had their share, the manager have had their share, and other people in the club have had their share. That is how things work nowadays if you don't win the league.
And Gregg, another thing the manager was asked about was the left-back, Andy Robertson, who he talked about in glowing terms, to be fair. I quite liked the way he almost held them up as this is what good looks like. When people are looking back at what a left-back should be doing, he talked about Andy Robertson as, that's your guy. That's who you can look at and go, if you're playing that position, you won't go far wrong than to look at him.
Yeah, no, you know, it speaks for itself, the kind of, you know, career that Robertson has had at Liverpool during his time, and he's grown to be one of the big figureheads in the dressing room, and a lot of the players, not even just, you know, the left backs and, you know, Kostas when he was here and now Kerkez, you know, not even just those two looking up to him as a figurehead, as an idol, but, you know, all the new players do, and I think that's more of a testament to how, you know, how much of a positive spark a player or a character like Robbo is for Liverpool. I think he suits Liverpool perfectly. I think, you know, he's one of the, for me, he's one of the figureheads of, you know, this Liverpool era, and he shows the kind of determination that is expected and from a Liverpool side, if you know what I mean by that. And you know, as we all know, Mo Salah did never give up shit, but you know, Robertson was and still is kind of, he displays that when he's on the pitch. And you know, obviously in recent years he might not be the same player that he once was, but I still feel like this season he's done his dues. I still feel like this season he's come up with some good and, you know, some spectacular moments as well. And you know, obviously we're all gutted to see him go at the end of the season, and it's going to be quite a tough ask to replace him, and not just a player aspect. And I know we've got Kerkez, and I think Kerkez has been very good in the last few months of the season, but just to replace the character in the dressing room, to replace the culture that a player like him brings into the team and the squad.
Sean, I think it's fair to say maybe Robbo's powers have faded a little bit over the last 18 months, 2 years. Still done well at times, but maybe not quite the same player he once was. I'm intrigued by the whole leadership and standards thing, because it's talked about a lot now, you know, in the context of the manager, but obviously in the context of maybe some of the players who might be leaving the club. Where I find it hard to square a little bit is that there's no doubt some of those senior players have been unbelievable leaders in the dressing room, because you get that sense, you know, from an Alisson, from a Salah, from a Robertson, from a Van Dijk, etc. Now, potentially a number of them are going to leave, and people will talk about things like, well, you're losing a huge kind of part of the leadership in terms of what's been good for Liverpool. But then where it becomes slightly more difficult is that they've all been there this season, and yet there's been a distinct lack of leadership, both maybe you'd say from the manager because of how things have played out this season, but also at times on the pitch. And some of those lads I've mentioned have been on the fucking pitch. So Where do you land with that? Because I am finding this one a bit of a tricky one to navigate, if I'm honest.
I mean, look, I know they win the European Cup, but I think 1980-81, there's some serious legends and leaders in that Liverpool squad that come fifth for Bob Paisley. And I think that you can have brilliant leaders and standards within the dressing room and have a bad season and things not go your way. And the way of looking at it is, can you imagine what we'd be like if we didn't? And I think Liverpool's maybe a bit of an exception, but I think with the move, rightly, I think, towards a lot of data analysis when it comes to recruitment and when it comes to sporting directors, my nervousness is that too many of them haven't lived what you actually need in the training ground and what you need on the pitch and what you need on a match day and what you need about the standards. In the early 80s, there was talk that when Liverpool was scouting players under like Jeff Twentyman, they weren't asked what you look like when things were going well. You win 3-0 at home and look good. They were interested in, like, not picking on them, but like a rainy, horrible night at Sunderland and you 1-0 down with 20 to go. Now, how many players go, this isn't for me, let's move on? And how many go, I'm making this our day? Like, what are you like in that window when you're up against it? And you look at your Milners, your Lallanas, your Hendersons in and around the training ground. Apparently, if you look at Firmino, he was different in the basis that he wasn't on people going, we don't do that here. It was just his standards and everything were absolutely perfect. Like, and that was sort of the way he showed that kind of leadership. And with Richard Hughes being a former player, that'll help. But I do think when Jurgen was there, you've got someone in them recruitment meetings that may be like, look, the data might say that player you want to bring in is really good, but he fails the, without swearing, he fails the bad egg rule, if that makes sense. And I think to play for Liverpool, there's going to be loads of games where things are going well for you and you can look good. But I don't think you judge it by that. You judge it by, like, you're up against it and what have you got? So I think, yes, there's been seasons under Klopp that haven't gone our way when a lot of them players I've referenced have been there. You know, we can talk about Souness and Dalglish in that dressing room and pick out seasons where the league form maybe wasn't that great. But I just think you're much better with it than without. And Liverpool do have to be massively careful because otherwise there's too much weight on the head coach's shoulders to manage that. It's the senior players on the training ground, in the canteen, on WhatsApps, going, no, we don't do that here. Like, that's not on. You know, when you come into the dressing room, I think you want the players, when things aren't going well, you don't want to be coming into a quiet dressing room where they're waiting on you. You want to come in with players at each other's throats. And you'll quieten them down and tell them off, but secretly you're quite happy that you've got them leaders in there sort of taking charge of things. And Liverpool need to be very careful, I think, with the squad makeup.
One of those senior players, Josh, is Konate. Now, you know, he falls into that category. He's been around for Liverpool for a number of years. Obviously still relatively young as well, but Beth in the press conference asked a question about his contract, and, you know, she got the answer she expected, which was no news. Are you a little bit surprised that maybe that's not got done? Because there was certainly kind of noises from the player that actually we went too far away from seeing this kind of signed, sealed and delivered, and it's not quite there yet. Would that be a worry for you, or are you someone who actually, if Konate was to leave, maybe you're not that fussed?
No, I think I'd like him to stick around. I think he's, you know, someone who is genuinely like a good personality to have about the place. I think he's been a good option in the second half of the season as well. In fact, he's probably one of the ones who's come away with more credit as the season's gone on, really. Like, you know, Szoboszlai was the one who was like bona fide, no one anywhere near him, unanimous player of the season, first half of the season. I would actually say that Szoboszlai's dropped that level a little bit and that Konate has, you know, got a bit closer to that level with some of his performances. I think he has inspired leadership at times, and, you know, it's not been without big mistakes, and I think most of them did come in the first half of the season. It's not been without, you know, head scratching moments still, and even some of them have come in the second half of the season. I still expect it to get wrapped up. I imagine it gets wrapped up probably, you know, in the next couple of weeks now, coming up to the season's end. I can't remember when the Van Dijk and Salah contracts got wrapped up properly, but they run to like the 30th of June, I think, don't they? So like there's still time, even after the season's ended, where it can happen in that time. I think, unfortunately, it's a situation of Liverpool are in with contracts in general at the moment where they're sort of almost working through a bit of a backlog. Maybe players and agents have kind of capitalised on that backlog a little bit. It's why you've seen, you know, real stalemates in some of these contract talks. But if the player's coming out and saying that he feels like it's really positive, then clearly he's what he wants is already on the table, and I think that's the biggest obstacle to clear always. Like, I think if the player feels like it's in a good place, and I'm expecting it to get wrapped up, and I would be pleased about that. I would still like to believe that, in the next couple of seasons, Leone or Xhaka or someone like that is better than them, or better than Konate, or that Liverpool bring in someone who's better than Konate over the next few seasons. But we saw high turnover of the squad last season, where I think too many players left, to be honest. And even though I'd like to see quite a few coming in the summer, I would like not as many to leave, and Konate to me forms part of that.
Harvey Elliott got to mention, Gregg as well. James Pearce pushed the manager on Elliott's situation. I've got to be honest, I think at times how Harvey Elliott's been spoken about in some of these press conferences has not necessarily sat well with me. Almost like, listen, he's still a Liverpool player, but he's been spoken about in terms where he's none of our business, almost. And I've never really kind of liked that.
Considering the manager is like,
Yeah.
I know he's not like dying, but like, his reputation is dying a little bit. He's picking weird hills to die on with stuff like that. Like, even with Kostas the other week, he was like, Kostas will be back next season, effectively. I mean, it was words to that effect. I don't think he said pre-season though, whereas with Elliott, he only says pre-season. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, he wasn't quite as harsh this time as maybe he's been in other press conferences, but I think it's just a really sad one, if I'm honest, that Harvey's gone somewhere. And listen, this can happen, so it's not necessarily Liverpool's fault, and it's not Slot's fault that he's not played at Aston Villa more. But it just feels like for a talented footballer, and you can debate whether you think he's good enough for Liverpool's first team or not. I get that, but it's just a bit sad that a young, talented footballer has gone somewhere, and it just hasn't worked out for him. And you feel for him because he's a Liverpool fan as well, first and foremost, and he's done some good things in a red shirt.
I mean, Harvey Elliott has always kind of been one of those players which loads of people, as you said, like, have had their own like debates and thoughts on. And is he good enough to be part of the first team? Is he only like a bench player, or should we just ship him off and see how much money we can get from him? I've always rated him though. I've always thought that he's been quite an important player, and I thought that he's come up with some pretty clutch moments in a Liverpool shirt. You got the Crystal Palace a couple of years ago. You've got Wolves away as well. I think that same season. Just to mention a few. And there's a good player in there, and I just think the way he's kind of been almost discarded out of memories. It's almost as if like you're trying to forget that he's there, because it's almost a case of, if you remember that he is there and the club sent him out on loan and he could have been an extra option in this bad time, it almost makes the entire kind of operation look worse. So if you, by trying to discard him out of memories, it kind of just brings everyone back to, no, this is the squad that we've got. He's not involved. He's not a thing. He's not, you know what I mean? And this is our setup. This is what we're focusing on. Obviously, it happens. It's not Liverpool's fault that he hasn't, it hasn't worked out at Villa for him, and it definitely isn't Liverpool's fault that he hasn't been getting minutes and that he is kind of just an afterthought in this current setup. But it's still quite a bit of a shame for the manager to kind of publicly, not shame him, but discard him in that way and just say, pre-season, and that's it really. It kind of shows, for me, I think it kind of shows that maybe Slot doesn't really consider him in part of the plans for next season, and if that's what it is, then unfortunately, that is what it is. Obviously, sad news for Elliott, especially being a Liverpool fan, and for me personally, I think he's a great player to have in the squad as well. But I think that kind of reaction is shown. It's kind of like a metaphor for how Slot has been in press conferences anyway. Just that kind of like, if he doesn't want to talk about something, it's just this, done. If he does want to talk about something, he'll maybe twist the truth a little bit, be a bit mundane. It's just one of them. I don't think it's any different to what we've been seeing from Slot really all season. And again, it's one of those things that I go back to before, where I say it doesn't really fill you with hope. It doesn't really fill you with any sort of positivity. You're kind of just watching it and you're going, oh, well, that's another thing out the window. That's another thing that it's been and gone. It's done. And you just kind of think to yourself, well, again, like, where is the progress? Where is the thought? What's the plan? And that's for me. That's where I struggle with it the most.
Aston Villa then, Sean, on Friday. You're going to get into a bit of tactical stuff a little bit later on. We're going to hear from Tom Fahy soon as well. But just in terms of that fixture, listen, Villa have got arguably bigger fish to fry. They've got a big European final on the horizon. This game will still be important. I think Tom will go on and say that he thinks Villa will pick a fairly strong team. Firstly, what are your thoughts on the fixture? The manager was actually asked about away games and Liverpool's performance in certain away games, and he was pretty kind of clear. He's disappointed in how some of those games have gone. I think it's fair to say. But I found his comments interesting around, in terms of what he would want to be better. He talked about things like, I'd want them to maybe be fitter and more ready, certainly to take the challenge on of when it's kind of 2 games a week. And I think that's all really fair in terms of what I'd also expect. But I mean, he plays a big part in some of this. In terms of them being ready and fitter, I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely get that. But fucking hell, you're there to make sure that they are prepared and ready for these games. And that's not to let any players off the hook, by the way. I'll keep saying it. Some of these boys have got away with fucking murder this season with some of their performances. But yeah, what did you make of those kind of comments? And in terms of Liverpool as a proposition away from home, what have you made of them?
In terms of the comments, I mean, they obviously do jump out a little bit at you. I would say that if fitness and injury prevention was that easy, everyone would be nailing it. That's the first thing. And the second thing, that everyone, let's just focus on Liverpool, but everyone in them positions are highly qualified and acting in the best faith. Now, to give you an example of what's right and what's wrong, allegedly under like Jurgen, the big stress would be during the week. So like Jurgen's approach to running a marathon would be, well, if I train you to run 1.5 marathons, you'll find the marathon that little bit easier. Whereas under Slot, it's more, the big stress is the game. So therefore, the best way of you running a marathon is to be fresh. And I don't train you to do the 1.5 marathon. So maybe under Jurgen, you break people, getting them, to continue this mad analogy, to do the 1.5 marathons during the week, if that makes sense. Whereas under Slot, it's a different approach. Now, under Jurgen's time, we had loads of injuries. And under Slot's time, we've had loads of injuries, even though they're polar opposites. I think a difficult dynamic, if you're head coach at Liverpool, with relation to fitness and injury prevention, is that Liverpool, I don't think with their budget, their bonus structure, the way that they recruit players, can have 22 worldies. And I think the problem is Arne Slot wants 22 worldies, because he showed, if you give me Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo on the left, I'll rotate them. I've got no problem rotating them. You give him Darwin Núñez and Jota able to play as the 9, no problem rotating them. Even maybe Curtis Jones and Alexis McAllister last season, no problem rotating them. The difference is, I think, on the 1st of September, Jurgen would go to the squad and go, right, you've got me and I've got you. So my job is to get the most out of you, whether you're Harvey Elliott, whether you're Endo, whether you're Tsimikas. Let's get the most out of each other for this year. And if you meet me halfway with your behaviour and attitude, I'll get you minutes. Whereas Arne's approach seems to be, yeah, Harvey, like, yeah, just I'll speak to you next summer. Basically, you ain't playing for me. And he won a title, and you have to accept that. But I think one of the challenges that then gives the sporting director is how many squad players and younger players are knocking on your door going, get me out of here, mate. I'm not seeing a kick. He doesn't fancy me. He doesn't want me. And that's where I think it becomes difficult, because I think if you're Liverpool, I think they need to spread their butter a bit. You don't want to go thinner. They want to concentrate it on a core group. And I think if you're head coach at Liverpool, you have to accept that you might have an Endo and a Tsimikas and 3 youngsters that you don't want to use. But tough luck, like you are going to have to make the very most of that and get the best out of them.
It was interesting, Sean, that he mentions Villa's squad in terms of, and listen, it's all relative. I don't think he's suddenly saying Villa are a better team than Liverpool. But in terms of their squad, he talked about the level being very, very similar across the board and therefore quite interchangeable. Now, we didn't kind of bring Liverpool into it, but you got the impression that there was maybe 1 or 2 hints in there.
Yeah, and if you're sporting director, you go, and I've given you forwards. You got Chiesa, you got Rio. Now, I don't think they're necessarily like options, and I wouldn't count Rio because of his age and stuff in that sense. But he goes similar to exactly what you just said. Ian goes, no, you're not at the required quality. I'm not using you, and that's why he then references how many minutes all these players are having. It's still a choice. I think he might feel like he doesn't have one. Again, when you come to the away record against the top 10. Liverpool have had 8 games, lost 6, drawn 1, won 1. And I don't think you can count the one they won because it was Everton and they shouldn't be top 10. So what I would say on that though
let me count this, Sean, fucking hell.
We count it, but not as against a top 10 side. Now, look, Man City have won league titles where they've not had a good away record to the top 6. You can be successful without having to be great away to the top 6. Really difficult. Neil and Josh have done some real good stuff on trends on this kind of thing. But, Liverpool's away record is not good. And Aston Villa's home record is pretty good. It's worth saying the defeat to Spurs is 3 days after the away leg defeat to Nottingham Forest. So I wouldn't... You can read some tactical things and stuff, but I wouldn't read too much into that. Like, at home, they're decent. It's going to be lively. It's the last home game of the season before they go off. And Villa need a minimum... Villa get a win. They've got guaranteed Champions League qualification. So if you're in their shoes, they've got to go full strength because you could go into that final, no pressure of Champions League qualification, confident of beating Liverpool. They're 1-3 on to win the Europa League final. Freiburg are not great. For Liverpool fans watching this, think Frankfurt, quite similar to that kind of level, really. Villa should be doing them. And I think if they get a point, probably it's okay for Villa. Like Bournemouth drop points, they're all right. But the carrot dangling for them to win, they'll go full strength and it'll be really intense from the start. So we can't have any complaints after about Liverpool not being fit enough or ready enough for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we've now got Tom Fahy talking about Aston Villa, and then we'll have the insert from Neil speaking to Les Wright and Danny Smith about the six-a-side fundraiser.
Thanks, Ian. And it is John Gibbons now with Tom Fahy, who our Aston Villa correspondent for a long time and felt like online represented the club for the Liverpool fan base last week. I enjoyed seeing all your congratulations messages from people coming in who listened to the Anfield Wrap like you'd played. I was really into it, but hey, in a way you did. Those balls weren't going to drink themselves.
We all played our part in that. I feel like I felt like I was floating when I was leaving Villa Park. And then, like, I woke up the next day and I had people, like, in my DMs being like, really happy for you, mate, well done. And I was like, well, I did sing my heart out, so I do kind of deserve it. And I did have to do, like, a full day's work on, like, an incredibly bad hangover and kind of messaged everyone being like, you're going to have to give me some patience today. I'm very busy thinking about Istanbul. And then having to explain that to the non-football people at work that, like, no, this is the biggest moment of my life. And they were like, wasn't your son born like 2 years ago? And I was like, yes, let me repeat myself. This is the biggest moment of my life.
It's huge for the club, isn't it? But, there's games before that and there's ours on Friday, and it's a tricky one for Villa, really, because, top 5 isn't guaranteed for either of us at the moment. I feel like if Liverpool and Aston Villa are in a fight for that 4th position, it's two drunks in their underpants swinging at each other. It's got all the grace of that, but it is, whoever wins this game is guaranteed. Probably 4th as well, but definitely those Champions League places. So it feels like a slightly bigger game for both teams on Friday night, and either of them would like it to be for different reasons.
Yeah, I could really do with this game like not happening because it's just like dampening any excitement that I have for next week. I think like Unai Emery must have overheard me saying that if it gets to the Liverpool game, we've already qualified for the Champions League, that I'd like to play left back and have a go against Salah. So we've had so many opportunities to like finalize this Champions League spot. Like even 2 weeks ago, like pre-Fulham game, Unai Emery was like, finishing 5th, it isn't enough for me. I want to finish 3rd. And then we've gone back to back, lost to Fulham and drew with Burnley, who are already relegated.
Yeah.
So like all of our focus has, like, all of the players' focus, whether they want to say it or not, whether the club want to admit it or not, all of the focus has been on just that Nottingham Forest game. And you could tell when they stepped onto the pitch because it was a performance that we haven't seen for about 6 months. So them shifting focus now back to the league, there's really like no good league game that we could have played. I think I do like it a bit more that we're playing like, you may not agree, but we are playing against a good side. I'm going to do like inverted commas. The football isn't great at the moment for either of us, but we are playing a good side. We're not playing a team that's relegated. We're not playing a team that has nothing to play for and the shackles are off. We're playing a team who it also matters to them. So I'm hoping in kind of in that way that like steel sharpens steel and everyone will be up for it and playing for their place in the final. But then I know what will happen. It will get to 6:45 on Friday, and I'll be like, oh, Victor Lindelof's in midfield again. Like he's good there, but that's not really what you want the week before a final.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's not. And I think it is fair to say it's just enough of a gap, isn't it, for him to go as strong as he chooses to in this. I've always felt that 5 days is probably ideal in terms of having some football in your legs, but also the rest, and that's what the Premier League have given Aston Villa on this occasion. It's resting everyone, as tempting as it might be, would feel like there's a little bit too long between games. I think for some of those players, I think they'd sort of rather play. So I would expect him to go as strong as he can in this game, but unless someone's got a little niggle or anything. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's just basic. I think the team that we play on Friday will be the team for the final. Like he rotated people against Burnley just to save people's legs, and he's been doing this like weird thing where he's rotating out players who are like playing really well. Like he did it with Pau Torres a few weeks ago, where Pau Torres was really playing excellently, and then he rotated him, and everyone's like, "Oh, is Pau Torres injured?" He was like, "No, I'm just giving him a week off," and it's like, okay, we can't really afford to do that, so please don't do that. So I think the team on Friday is going to be as full strength as possible. Like basically every Villa fan wants this team to go out but not have Morgan Rogers playing in it, because that boy has played every game this season. He has played every minute. He has played 110 games in 2 years for Villa. Like everyone is like, please give him the day off before the final. Like he needs to join a union. I've been saying this for so long. He needs a day off. But like I think the team, he's going to go as strong as possible. Whatever he thinks is his strongest possible team. If he thinks his strongest possible team has Victor Lindelof in midfield, I'm okay with it, because he did really well against Elliot Anderson, and he even did all right against Burnley in a bit of a mad game. But yeah, I think he's just going to say to these lads, keep yourself fresh, and everyone else is going to be knocking on his door being like, it's a televised game on a Friday night. And you know what? A lot of these players, it might be their last game at Villa Park. Like Emi Martinez might be his last game. Luca Dean might be his last game. Morgan Rogers, it might be his last game. Ollie Watkins, you never know. So they're all going to want to play in it. And, we're all going to be in the hall and standing there waving them off like, I don't know, like a northern village sending their boys off to war in like 1935. We're all going to be like, go back and tell us stories from the home front. But yeah, it's going to be, full side, I think.
Yeah, and as you alluded to there, you could point to the European game and say, it might be a little bit of a distraction, but like you said, it is the last home game of the season, and they want to finish on a high at home. Teams always do. They want to go into that Freiburg game with confidence. So regardless of the fact that there is still, a small chance that either of those teams don't qualify for the Champions League, there's still that feeling of, listen, it's our last home game of the season. It's our last chance to play in front of these fans before the final. Some of them might not even want to be there, so they want to send you off, like you've just said there. And also Friday night's just a better atmosphere. And so there's a lot of reasons from a Liverpool point of view that we need to, get our heads around the fact that, it's not just going to be some lads, prancing about a field, desperately trying to not get injured.
Yeah, I don't think we'd let them either. Like the booing this season has been like.
Oh, we've had a good go as well. Yeah, there needs to be something written about this, the booing epidemic that's sweeping the country. Is it Farage's fault?
It might be, or it also might be that like when we played Spurs the other week, we rested basically every player, and the tickets were still 75 quid. So everyone was like, we're more than happy to rest players. Please just let us know that that's your intention when you go into the game.
Yeah, there needs to be joined up thinking.
Yeah. If you're not going to try, I'm not going to try. So please just let me know. But yeah, the Friday night atmosphere is going to be amazing, and I think it will just be a bit of a party. Like I've been at Villa Park when we've been trying to get to the playoffs, and the playoff has been confirmed, and you just like, nothing's on this. Like, let's just go for it. We've essentially got 3 free hits to get to the Champions League final, essentially. And I don't really want it to go down to the last day if we don't win the final, because I just can't fathom that. And it doesn't bear thinking about not winning that final. Like it just, my brain can't comprehend it. I don't know what I'll do if we don't win it. But, these are two sides that basically they are guaranteed Champions League football if Bournemouth don't win a game. So they both just need to put themselves in the best position, and there's no better way to do that than to just spawn a 1-0 on Friday, hopefully, touch wood.
Listen, we both bite anyone's hand off for a sporty 1-0, but we both can't get them. Let's talk a little bit about the final. I'm sure Neil will have a chat with you before it as well, but it probably won't be me. How excited is the city? How excited is the fan base? I saw a story about a guy selling his dad's watch.
Yeah.
My favourite thing about the story was his dad. His dad was called John Barnes. It really added,
Oh, amazing.
it really added an element of, it was like, yeah, John Barnes gave me, my dad John Barnes gave me this in 1988, and I was like, I'm sure he was at Liverpool.
Would have been a good watch, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But it just shows how big this is for people. Because listen, Aston Villa's a massive club, and I grew up with Villa being, a huge club and being aware, not quite old enough to watch it, but aware of the European Cup winning team that had a couple of Scousers in, and so people kind of talked about that. And then when I was, just becoming aware of football, Villa were challenging for titles, but it's been a long time since Villa have competed for European trophies and have been in these sorts of finals. And so, what is the excitement levels amongst people and just in the city as you walk around? Can you tell that the teams, because it's a big city, can you tell the teams going to the European final?
Yeah, there is kind of like an air about everything, which it felt like the last time we had this feeling was when we were in the playoff final. And there was just kind of like an air 3 days before the final where it's like, what if we don't win it? Because the last other big game, like epochal defining game, was the playoff final, and we had lost the playoff final the year before. And that was like the club's history and the club's existence was kind of riding on the line when we went up to the Premier League. We needed to win that game because in the summer we had like HMRC winding up orders, we hadn't paid our bills, that Jack Grealish was going to leave, and then we get back up to the Premier League, and then we stay up on the last day of that season. But everything it kind of feels has been built into this, like over the last 30 years. Like I put myself through hell this morning, and I was like, how many finals or big games have I seen Villa lose in my lifetime? And like, I thought it didn't bear thinking about, but then I really drilled it down. I've seen us lose 2 FA Cup finals, 2 League Cup finals, an FA Cup final, a playoff final, a semi-final against League Two Bradford, which a Conference League semi-final. We gave up on winning trophies basically as soon as I could talk. We gave up on that. 1996 was the last one, and there's Blues fans have got an online tracker of how many days since Aston Villa last won a trophy, which I would take that from like any other group of fans rather than the team that is in the Championship and have won 1 League Cup in their history. So there's going to be, if we win it, there's just going to be this huge cathartic release of, we've finally done it. That monkey is off our back. We can no longer do the thing like, oh, no generation's seen a whole generation of fans haven't seen Villa win a trophy. And we can just ignore that, and we can just have a summer, and we can go into the last game of the season as well, where it's like, Man City, do you need 30 goals to win the league? Let's give you them. If we've won that final, we can do whatever we want. So it's just huge, and everyone knows someone who's going. My uncle's going. One of the lads that I go to the game with is going. So it like, even Friday will just be shaking hands with everyone that I sit nearby and being like, have an amazing time in Istanbul. Like,
Yeah.
be safe, come home, bring home the stories. It's amazing that we finally got there. But if we don't win it, it's for nothing, essentially. Like, I always say that Unai Emery needs this. He needs this for his Aston Villa tenure to be remembered as amazing as it was. Like, he doesn't want to be remembered like Martin O'Neill, where it's like, oh, 3 top 6 finishes in a row, but didn't get over the line and lost in finals. But if Unai Emery wins this, there's a really good chance, and I've been platforming this a lot, there's a really good chance we name the North Stand after him. There's a really good chance that he gets a statue because, we weren't really doing anything before he came into the club. We were in a relegation battle under Gerrard. We had finished 11th the season before. We had stayed up on the last day of the season before. He comes in, Europe, Champions League, Europa League, Champions League again, potentially. Like, it's nuts. He's the most important man in the city in the last 50 years. Sorry, Ron Saunders, but it's huge. It's everything. I can't focus on anything. Like, all of my work emails have just been like, I'm not in on the Wednesday because it is the final. I'm not in on the Thursday because I'm hoping to be very hungover, but in a good way.
Well, I'm sorry to be bringing up other stuff earlier in the call, but it was really nice to sort of hear your excitement. And I agree with you. Ron Saunders has had it all his own way far too long. Get out the way. It's all about Unai Emery. Tom, good luck working between now and Wednesday. Hopefully the players are as distracted as you tomorrow night, should I say, and Liverpool win. And yeah, onwards and upwards for the Villa way.
Up the Villa.
3 years ago, you might remember we had Les Wright and Danny Smith in to talk about Danny's injuries sustained in the aftermath of what went on in Paris, and how he wanted to make a few changes and be supported with what was going to go on next with his life. Now, what we didn't have at that point was an idea of what it was that Danny was going to go on and do. And it transpires, for the last couple of years, Danny, you've been training to become a physiotherapist.
Psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist?
Yeah. I'm 2 years into it now. It's been amazing. I had a bit of psychotherapy after Paris, and it also dealt with issues I had about Hillsborough. From the Hillsborough Survivors Alliance, they provided psychotherapy.
They're an unbelievable organisation.
Amazing. And on the back of Paris, you know, as bad as it was and everything else, a lot of people come forward to get therapy because of Hillsborough. That was triggered in Paris. So, you know, we're grateful for that. But the HSA have put a lot of people through therapy since, and I was one of them.
And so as part of that, you thought, firstly, you'd want to give back to that profession, possibly give back to the community as well as part of all this, and you've been retraining to become a psychotherapist.
Yeah, so I'm 2 years into it now, Neil. It's been amazing. It's the modality in training is transaction analysis. It's a psychoanalytic modality. It's absolutely amazing. I feel about TA the way I felt about Liverpool as a teenager. I absolutely love it. And so I've got a sense of purpose back now. I've got this sense of wanting to give back to everyone. And I think this is the best way to do it now, because I'm very limited physically now with my leg. I'm in constant pain. But yeah, the last 2 years have been amazing. I found a purpose and I'm going to go.
And what that purpose comes as well from the first place from the community support that you received last time. As part of that, you know, when you're saying that you feel like a teenager about it, you got that sort of enthusiasm. That's because the community came together and gave you the support.
Yeah, I would have went under, Neil. There's been days I wanted to just stay in bed and feel sorry for myself and be a bit of a victim, but you know the wave of support that I've had since Paris is, I let myself down, but I'm not going to let everyone else down, and it wasn't an option. So yeah, I'm just loving the course. I'm 2 years into it now. I've just been passed fit to practice, so I've got another year's training, but in the meantime, I've got to do 100 hours placements, unpaid work, and I just found a place in suicide intervention charity. So I'm really excited to be starting here next month.
Les, you were part of led the campaign to support Danny in the aftermath of Paris. You know, he looks like a different person coming in here today. You must have seen this sort of progression in him as he's found this calling at this time.
It's just been, you know, we each have our own journey, but Danny's was a bit tougher than most. And so I said to Danny, there's 4 stages of this process. You know, first of all, you've got to get the rehabilitation, which fortunately we had a bit of help with LFC, and that physio was most important to get his physical well-being back together, and that affects your mental health. And then there was the case of, okay, what do we want to do here? And he said, I want to go into train to be involved in mental health. So how do we do that? Because it's going to cost money. You've got residential courses, you've got books to buy, you've got travel. You know, it's quite an expensive thing. So, you know, you guys helped out with the PR last time, and the other media groups in the city have all continued to help. But the long shot of it was, we held the event at Anfield and we raised enough money at a big event to cover Danny's first 2 years of costs. And now, obviously, we're not going to leave him hanging here. So the idea was to revisit on a smaller scale. Yeah. Because we need to finance the 1 year to get him over the line. And, you know, Danny will tell you about maybe some of his plans to give back to the community. And this is kind of like what I'm saying about before, the steps to progress. So step 4 would be getting a job and giving back. So, you want to...
Yeah, so at the minute, I'm facilitating a group in the Rotunda College, my local community where I'm from, Kirkdale, men's shed group to that, and also helping out to the food bank and social brokers. So this is part of going forward. I'm training TA, the modality is really good in groups as well. I'm really good with trauma, and I'm really passionate about men's health. You know, we could be better about speaking about our health. You know, I was brought up by strong women, so I've got that in me, but we need to be better as men. And the group work going forward, that's what I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I've got a ton of ideas moving forward about men's groups. I mean, it's particularly lads at the match, you know, lads in work and things like that. Yeah, so going forward, that's what I'd like to do.
You know, just by sheer coincidence, we were at Goals, the location of the five-a-side game later on, and a guy that we both knew who had death by suicide, who was roughly our age, and one of the chit-chats went on was maybe, you know, this time next year, Danny said, I might be able to come back and actually host like a session for men's mental health at a five-a-side football location. I thought that's already the thought process of paying back is already there.
Yeah. And so the next sort of stage of this then obviously is we're going to at Goals in Netherton. You run on the 6th of June. There's going to be a big five-a-side tournament that you're running.
Yep.
You're looking for people to participate. You're looking for sponsors as well as.
Yeah. So what we've done is we've got 16 teams. We've got the whole thing. So if people have got kids that want to come along and play on one of the, pitch number 9, they can. So we've got 16 teams, 10 in the squad. We'd like to get some ladies involved if we can. That'd be great. And 2 knockout competitions.
Yep.
So you've got like a Champions League and a
Europa League.
Yeah, Europa League. Yeah.
That's not Europa League. Come on.
So we got that sort of going on, and the idea really is just to get teams both locally to support within Liverpool and 6th, but also if supporters clubs or Liverpool fans would like to become engaged and maybe host their own local, whether it could be in Adelaide, it could be in Hong Kong, whatever it might be, host their own charitable five-a-side competition. That money will all go to Danny, and what's so beautiful about this whole idea is the local charity called Enough for Others are acting as the due diligence. So it's going through a charity. There's no expense other than the pitch, which was paid for today. There are no other expenses, so all the costs with no admin will go to Danny via a registered charity. So we know we've got this compliance as well.
And Enough for Others is itself a fantastic organisation as well, Les. You know, it's one that I know that you and Danny have been close to, Dan, as we have as well. Kevin, and all the work that goes on there is exceptional.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, we're doing things that are almost like collaboratively. We help them and they help us and this, that, and that. And this, it was just a beautiful gesture. And I said, well, if you need any expenses, we could. And they were, not at all, because they're friends with Danny. But you have to ask the question, you know what I mean?
Of course you do. So the key question, Les, is, where do people get involved? What's the best web address? What's the place to find us all on social media? What's the best way people can get stuck in?
Right. So what we've done is we've had a brochure published with all the details, which we shared via social media. We've got email addresses to contact mine. If you're a company or you're a sponsor and you want to get involved and join in, it's ambassadorleswright@gmail.com. And Danny is stand up for Danny Smith 26@gmail.com. So they're the main 2 ways, but we want to provide information about the event as well. So there's a little bit of narrative there, and so we're asking the people to share this widely because we want to make a success. We want to get Danny over the line, and that's the most important thing to do.
Excellent stuff. So it is on June the 6th.
Yeah.
When people around the world on June the 6th, it'll be a laugh, wouldn't it? People playing footy here on June the 6th.
Imagine that, yeah.
Fun, wouldn't it?
Well, it's at the end of the season before the World Cup starts.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we chose that date.
And hopefully it'll be a lovely day.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like today, it was lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the business. Listen, the community coming together in so many different ways, and then people giving back as well in the aftermath is the big part of all of this. Thank you very much to Danny. Thank you very much to Les for coming in. Get involved if you can.
Thank you.
And Sean, Tom laid out what he thinks Villa will do. How do you see them shaping up? What do you think the challenge will be?
I think they'll probably play the same team that they did against Nottingham Forest. So you're obviously going to have Andy's mate, Martinez, in goal, and then you're going to have Konsa and Torres, Matty Cash, Luca Digne, and now they played Lindelof actually in midfield with Tielemans, Buendia on the right-hand side. You then have McGinn, and then Ollie Watkins and Morgan Rogers. And they kind of be a bit like that Villarreal width from the full-backs, 4-2-2. They're overperforming XG this season. They're very 1-1 kind of side, like to be statty about it. They have 13 shots for on average, 13 against. Their XG is minus 0.01, which is as close to 0 XG goal difference as you're going to get. There's a few things tactically with them that you can take from the Tottenham game, which is what they do. Liverpool quite suit their 4-4-2 mid-block. And Emery likes to set them up in this 4-4-2 zonal shape. And obviously against a 4-4-2 in a mid-block, a couple of things you can do. There's pockets around it to try and get in. And something Tottenham did, which we've done in the past, is they had 4 runners with lots of people trying to get in behind. We actually saw Darwin Núñez have a lot of success against Pau Torres. He used to make a lot of runs into that channel. Mo Salah would drop in, Trent being able to play balls. And there's that game at Anfield where Liverpool just get in and behind them in that channel constantly. So the carrot does dangle a little bit there. And there's things you can look at that Tottenham do in terms of them dropping the midfielders into full-back areas to progress the ball, try and tempt the Villa wingers out. And that's definitely something I think Liverpool need to look at against Villa. Because once they go into that low block, the problem is they can defend that pretty well. What you've got to do is sort of build out and try and play through Villa when they're in that mid-block, which is what Spurs did really well. And I think the big thing for Liverpool is that Villa get most of their attacking chances from high-press shots and set pieces, like a lot of teams. So the problem for Liverpool, we've got to defend set pieces really well, which has been a challenge. And the other problem that dangles for Liverpool is what you do when that's their biggest strength. And I think the carrot's there that Liverpool have got to be creative, maybe more creative than they were against Chelsea, in terms of what are you going to do to break down these lines and have runners getting in the back of Aston Villa.
Yeah, interesting, the set piece thing. And obviously Villa take a lot of shots from outside the box. We know how much Liverpool loved, not turning the back on shots, Josh, don't we? We've seen it all season. In terms of the Liverpool team, what do you think Arne Slot goes with?
It's a tricky one in terms of like the left back is sort of feels a little bit interchangeable at the moment. I'd be tempted to go with Kirkes for this one, just based on what Sean's saying there about the idea that you sort of attack Villa in a mid-block. And again, like I almost think that the way that Robertson has played in the second half of the season means that him and Kirkes' style is kind of a little bit interchangeable. I just imagine that Kirkes is a player with more thrust.
I think Robbo might, obviously, you'd like to think he'll be able to start the last game of the season, given everything that's kind of around that. But obviously, if there's something riding on it, the manager's then got a different decision or a decision to make.
Yeah, it's not that you can't play Robertson when there is something riding on it necessarily. Yeah, and
but I think Kirkes is probably his first choice if we're being
we're
really
only
honest.
playing one game a week as well, so that's why I say that to me feels like the toss of a coin. And if either are on the team sheet, it's probably not the position I'm griping about. I think again, based on what Sean said there, and to be honest, just because of the way the fitness selections are really at the moment, probably necessitates Frimpong starting at right wing again. Now, I don't think Frimpong is a right winger. I think he's flat to deceive when he's played there this season. For all that everyone has criticised him when he plays right back, I think he's been far better at right back than he has at right wing. But again, that idea of like getting him behind, sort of that almost being the way that Liverpool can get out, I think Frimpong works for that. I'd have Gakpo down the middle, Rio off the left, Jones at right back then with that. So basically similar to what we've seen in the past couple of weeks, which is unfortunate, but again it's what what fitness dictates really. But it would be a huge game for lads like Gravenberch and Szoboszlai, because they're two of the players you sort of looked in that midfield to provide forward thrust. I think Curtis Jones can be almost like a cheat code really for Liverpool in terms of the way that they build out, where he does kind of come into midfield a little bit. They're going to let Konate have a lot of time on the ball, so giving Konate a lot of space where he can kind of move into, but also seeing Frimpong drop back to be an option for him, I think would be good for Liverpool if Villa are going to press up a little bit higher. And yeah, like it feels like there's almost banana skins within this game that Liverpool just need to not slip up on, and that's where I don't necessarily trust this group of players in the form they're in right now to not do that. So it's definitely one that I'm worried about, to be honest.
I think the goalkeeper one will be interesting, Gregg, because when we were kind of breaking before, Andy mentioned that Alisson may be able to kind of feature. I think he was on the training pitch. But obviously the manager wasn't too sure when he did his press conference. It'll feel nice to have him back, maybe, if that's doable. What else would you maybe kind of look to do in the team? Because I think as Josh has laid it out there, I'm assuming you will be playing McAllister then, given how you've structured the team. That does feel a bit of a problem for me, given some of his performances, and he's not the only one. Let's be really clear about it. But I do find it still quite striking that, given his level this season, he's virtually played in all the games. He's played in a lot of the games. He's got so many appearances. And I'm just not sure, well, I am sure, that the performances haven't warranted that amount of appearances, if I'm being honest.
I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to availability and selection. If maybe you have Salah available in this game, he's playing right wing, and Frimpong's getting thrown at right back, which means then Curtis Jones is playing in the middle. And it's
certainly for this one, you can make that case.
Yeah,
but I think there's
yeah,
been other
of course.
times
Yeah,
where,
no.
I mean, if you look at injuries, I suppose, across the course of the season, where they haven't really been hampered is probably the midfield area.
Yeah, true.
You know, Jones has missed a couple,
Yeah.
but I know Verts has missed a few, but more often than not, they've had probably more options in midfield than they've had maybe in other parts of the pitch.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, you've seen games like Chelsea on the weekend, they've just gone, where Gomez was sound, he was on the bench, he comes on, I mean, maybe he could have just been thrown at right back instead, and then, you know, Jones could have just been thrown in the middle to do what he does best in the middle. And you'd have these questions of why isn't this happening, and you've just got to, at that point, you've got to trust the manager to be like, well, this is what's happened in training, this is the reason for it. And, you know, but at the end of the day, when you don't see these things happen and the results stay the same, you know, you do question why, you know, Gomez is there, you're paying him every week, and he doesn't start at right back when he is. You know, we've seen him play at right back before for Liverpool, and we've seen him play at left back as well, and he's not been bad there either. And you're thinking, well, if he just played him there, maybe, you know, the Frimpong thing at right wing is like, who else are you going to play there? It's one of them things where you look at it, go, okay, sound, we have no one else who can actually play there. But we've got someone else who can play in the right back position, which could allow Jones more freedom in the middle. It could allow him to be a bit more creative. And obviously he's got more time at right back. That's the reason why we loved watching Trent so much, because it was like he's at right back. He's got all the time in the world to ping a ball 50 yards if he wanted to. But, you know, with Jones, he likes to hold on to the ball. He likes to take on a man. He likes to kind of do a little nitty-gritty kind of things and then try and lay it off. And I've been his biggest critic, and said that maybe he holds on to the ball for too long, but then you look at it the other way and be like, maybe he just hasn't got any options. Because at right back, I mean, he's only got two things that he can maybe do: pass it back to Kanate or knock it forward and hope that a Liverpool player gets on the end of a loose ball. In terms of the team selection, I'd pretty much do what you've done there. I just think at this point of the season now, with the options that you've got, you haven't really got any. You've not really got a way of being too adventurous. You've kind of just got to stick to what has been going on now for the best part of maybe 3-4 weeks, and just hope for the best. And it gets to a point though where you look at it and you go like, we've been trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and we're getting similar results each time. It's just a very awkward one to be in, really. You know, maybe if you had Verts definitely available, you'd be like, okay, maybe there's a bit more idea in the middle, and maybe you can drop Macher and do something experimental with the midfield. Or, you know, as I said before, if Salah was there, you know he's playing at right wing, so then you'd be like, okay, so I'm sound. Frimpong, he's probably going to start at right back, or maybe we just keep it the same. Curtis Jones plays at right back, and you know, one of them. It's as I said before, it's a confusing situation to be in, and ultimately, as I said before, it's expecting different things with the same setup. And going into the game, all I can hope for is that at the very least, we have situations in which Liverpool are intense, in which we have situations in which Liverpool look like they want to play football. You know, whereas in the last 20 minutes of the game against Chelsea, it's not even that the players were played in the wrong position or the tactics weren't working. It simply just looked like Liverpool didn't care anymore. And I think that's up to the players themselves to, you know, rightfully just give themselves a kick up the arse and be like, look, no, there's something riding on this game here, and we've got to go out and fight, and we've actually got to go put out a performance that gets us that Champions League football next season.
A lot riding on the game, Sean, in the context of, you know, what Gregg said there. You know, we can get Champions League football absolutely nailed and put to bed. I think the Curtis Jones thing is interesting at right back. You know, Neil's made a strong case for it in recent weeks. I understood it because of, you know, what he can do in possession, but you do get a real glimpse of what he's like out of possession at right back as well. Despite Liverpool having another full week in training, didn't quite look like they'd nailed anything down in terms of, you know, what happens when the opposition have got the ball. You know, they'll finding it very, very easy to get in down that side. Do you think that will be a concern going into this one? Do you think there will be any temptation to maybe look at Gomez and then you can shift Jones if you choose to do so? What would you do?
If I show you on the tactics board very quickly, this is in yellow, that is Aston Villa's setup about how they build out from the back, and what Spurs did against them is they went man to man. But the problem is they split the back two and have Martinez just stand with his foot on the ball. So what they did was they gave Richarlison the task of jumping the keeper, blocking passing lanes, and you force them into a forward pass. The problem is you're going to have two midfielders who are right on top of them and really good at winning the ball back. The other thing is McGinn is just going to drop into these areas, into midfield type areas, so that Watkins can spin in behind. You're going to have Buendia coming into midfield areas, so that again, Watkins can spin in behind. And then you're going to have Digne raiding down one side and Cash raiding down the other. So I don't like Frimpong on the right wing, but I think being away from home and looking at the Spurs template, I would prefer to see Rio on the right, as much as that's not ideal. But in this game, I think I would go Frimpong on the right, so that at least first hour he can track Digne and do the defensive work. I'd have Jones at right back, so that when Buendia comes in, you've got a midfielder coming in with him into areas where Jones might be more natural, but also, what I was saying before, to try and get through their mid-block, get Jones on the ball. I'd have Andy Robertson against McGinn. No one knows John McGinn's game better than Andy Robertson, let's face it. Probably deal with John McGinn's arse, backing into him all the time. And then, I think in midfield, the big thing, no one has forced him to play McAllister as the deepest midfielder. He'd had Gravenberch and Szoboszlai as the deepest, and I thought they were just starting to develop quite a nice relationship. And if you play Szoboszlai on the right, you've got his legs for Curtis Jones and to help you out there. So I would like to see Ryan Gravenberch and Dominic Szoboszlai as the deepest midfield players, and I would then have McAllister, and I would give him that Richarlison role of working the keeper and the centre-back, so that you can hopefully get an hour out of Isak, and you're not getting Isak to do all them doggies and do, burn what sprints he has got by doing that. I'd just sit him on Pau Torres and say, you man-to-man him and deal with it. And then at least you've got Rio Ungamoa on the bench as well to come on. Hopefully Mo Salah on the bench to come on. And if Wirtz isn't going to make everyone ill, hopefully Florian Wirtz to come on for some minutes.
Score-wise, how do you see it playing out?
I think we'll lose.
Well, brilliant news. On top of that.
Obviously, Ian, I'm not a shithouse, so I'm never going to come in here, even in the worst times, and predict a Liverpool defeat. So I'll go with... ignoring what Sean said about the Tottenham game before, I'm going to assume that Villa have got a lack of focus in this one, and that
think they will go full strength.
I do think they will. I think there's just about enough time in between those games, Friday to Wednesday, for a team who's been in Europe all season to.
It's important to keep people ticking over. Exactly. I think from their point of view. So I can imagine quite a strong team. Whether it finishes as a strong team maybe is up for debate, because I think the manager will be keen to wrap a couple up in cotton wool.
I just think there'll be loads in the heads who are mentally wrapping themselves in cotton wool. It won't be John McGinn. I think he'll be the one who won it, especially if it's
just on that though. Their goal difference is so bad that Bournemouth and Brighton, if Villa were to lose, they've got a massive problem, because if they lose the Europa League final, he can't. After what happened last season, Emery is then got to go to Man City on the last day of the season. So I think if you're Unai Emery with what's gone on, I don't think he's got to. I think they've got to go for this and win the game.
I think your point, Sean, before around just taking the pressure off a little bit in the final feels an important one, because if you've got it wrapped up, then you can go into that match and think, well, yeah, we should win this because of what you said before about the level of the opponent. But just knowing you've got that almost fallback option feels huge. Greg, give me a score prediction.
I don't even know what to do with score predictions this season with us, honestly, because it just feels so like. I don't know.
No one checks that, honestly. Just do what you want.
I'll go with 2-1, by the way. I didn't put a number on mine. I'll go 2-1 to Liverpool. There you go, Greg, beat that one.
I think it's going to be the same as last season. I think 2-2.
2-2. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Thank you to the boys. That has been the pre-match warm-up, and the lads behind the cameras. We'll see you soon.